Welcome back to another UCL Fantasy video. This will be the best wildcard team for Matchday 8, the second leg of the round of 16. It is a bit of an awkward time to wildcard, but it can be very relevant for some of you. And what these wildcard videos provide is not only tips for those that are using the chip, but also for those that are looking for transfer plans for their normal transfers. And in this case, we get free for the round of 16, the second leg. Then we get 5 transfers for the first leg of the quarterfinals. It's a pattern that repeats itself. So 3 transfers for the second leg of each round and 5 for the first leg of the following one. So be sure to let me know if you have any other questions or comments, and check out my how to play UCL fantasy guide. What I want to do as well in the Limitless video is talk about the best Limitless team, of course, but also provide you updates on all the injuries and suspensions at the time of this recording. So in this case, it's recorded on the Friday, the 1st of March. There are plenty of games to be played over the weekend in the domestic league, so injuries could happen, but I'll keep you up to date in the comment section, and of course in future videos such as the team selection and the deadline stream next Tuesday. Be sure not to miss it. Smash the like button of this video. Let's get this to over 200, and we're looking to push on towards 23k subscribers. Potentially we could reach that goal by next week. It'd be greatly appreciated. But without further ado, let's jump straight into this video. Lunin was a hero for me in Matchday 7. He made 9 saves and was rewarded with 9 points in UCL Fantasy, helping Real Madrid to keep a clean sheet. And he's actually got 7.3 points per matchday, the most by far of any goalkeeper in this competition. He's only played 3 matches, but a 12-pointer in the group stages. He blanked in 1 game, and then a 9-pointer in the first leg of the round of 16. Very impressive stuff from Lunin. Courtois is back in training, but it's a very gradual process as he suffered an ACL injury. So Courtois will still not be back in the mix of things for quite some time, and that really paves the way for Lunin to be the undisputed number 1 for the time being, and potentially for the rest of the season. I think Lunin is not a must-have, but in terms of value, I don't think any other goalkeeper, except maybe Sommer, really offers you that value. You generally want to go for expensive goalkeepers like Ederson and Neuer, who will probably go far in the competition, but you've got one here in Lunin, and the same could be said for yet another cheap option in goal who has been incredible recently and throughout the season, and I'm talking about none other than Jan Sommer, who is third in terms of points per match day amongst goalkeepers with 5.3. Only Kobel and Lunin have more, and I think these two are the best goalkeepers in the game. I'm very happy to have gone for both of them. Now, both ties do remain in the balance, as Real Madrid and Inter Milan won 1-0, but Inter Milan now have to go to Madrid against Atletico, and that's still going to be quite tough. Even though Atletico just lost 3-0 against Athletic Bilbao in the Copa del Rey, I still think Inter Milan might struggle there, but you have to say Inter Milan are in incredible form, and it's not just a recent thing, it's something that they've done over the course of the season, and that's why they're 12 points clear of second place Juventus. Sommer just came back from an illness, by the way, and Inter Milan won 4-0 against Atalanta, and in the game that Sommer missed out on, Inter Milan won 4-0 against Nice away from home. So Inter Milan are definitely worth investing in, but I'd still be quite apprehensive about getting 3 or 4 Inter Milan players, because Atletico Madrid are a good team, and in knockout football, anything can happen. But Inter Milan are one of the best teams in Europe. They've kept 8 clean sheets in the last 9 matches, and while Sommer's been in the team, that's 7 clean sheets in the last 8 games. And overall, Inter Milan are a team to beat. I think they are actually one of the dark horses of the Champions League. They reached the final last season, and they could go one step further this time round. So for me, the 2 best goalkeepers on the wild card are Lunin and Sommer. Some viewers pointed out Beraldo in my recent streams and videos, and I have to say, you got that spot on. He got an 8-pointer in Matchday 7 against Real Sociedad, and he has started 8 games out of the last 10 in all competitions since joining Paris Saint-Germain in January. And he's a young Brazilian left-back. He's got some ball recovery potential. He does pick up a few yellow cards, but Beraldo is a decent option to cover that Paris Saint-Germain defence, and he's got 2 yellow cards in the last 10 games, which is a bit concerning. He also got a lot of yellow cards during his time at Fluminense, and PSG are 9 points clear in Ligue 1. Brest are in second place. They're the closest challengers, but PSG should win the league quite comfortably. And I think Beraldo is probably the best way to cover the PSG defence in terms of pure value. I know Hakimi is going to be more appealing. Even Marquinhos is looking very solid, but he's currently doubtful, and he might be a risk for Matchday 8. Then you've got a few others like Lucas Hernandez, but he was benched for the first time in the Champions League in Matchday 7, and that's who I went for. So I went for the wrong Paris Saint-Germain defender, and I think Beraldo could be the best way to cover that Parisian defence. Now, the second defender I'm going to mention is someone I've talked about a lot, especially in the knockout stages, and that's Kim Min-jae. Bayern Munich lost 1-0 in the first leg against Lazio, and I know they've been struggling a lot under Thomas Tuchel, but a lot of us would expect them to progress still to the quarterfinals, and Kim Min-jae still produced 6 points in Matchday 7 despite not keeping a clean sheet, and that goes to show the value of ball recoveries, and Kim Min-jae is second in terms of ball recoveries amongst all players. Only Mats Hummels has more. And my only concern with Kim Min-jae is that there's been a lot of rotation between the centre-backs. De Ligt and Dyer started the last game against Leipzig, but with Upamecano suspended, and by the way, he's the only player to be suspended for Matchday 8, then that opens the door for Kim Min-jae to start against Lazio. Let's see if Bayern Munich can get their act together and progress to the next round. But let me know if there are any Bayern fans or those that watch Bundesliga football. Do you think Kim Min-jae is at risk of being benched in Matchday 8? It is a possibility, but I firmly believe he will start, and one of De Ligt or Eric Dyer will accompany him as one of the centre-backs. Now, the other defender, I mentioned him just now, he's got the most ball recoveries of any player and the most points amongst any defender, and that's Mats Hummels. But there is a big caveat and a huge caution I need to urge, because Hummels has only started one game in this calendar year, and that was in the Champions League against PSV Eindhoven, but Schlotterbeck could be a safer pick. You could even go for Ryerson or Maatsen, who've been starting every single game for Borussia Dortmund, but Mats Hummels hasn't been doing so in the Bundesliga, and that's a major cause for concern. But what I like about Hummels is the ball recovery potential. 67 for the season, Kim Min-jae is second with 60, and I think that is a big plus, and something I like about UCL Fantasy over other fantasy formats such as FPL, for example. But Hummels remains a good option. Just keep an eye out for rotation. It's still a possibility, and hopefully that isn't the case, because Hummels is a great UCL Fantasy option. Now, I've got 2 defender slots left, and I'm going for 2 of the best teams in the Premier League and also across Europe. Ruben Dias to cover Manchester City with a home tie against Copenhagen, and he's also started a lot of games for Manchester City recently. But what I like most about Ruben Dias, and also any Man City asset, is their current form. They're unbeaten in 17 matches since the 6th of December when they lost 1-0 to Aston Villa, and Dias has started 11 out of the last 13 games across all competitions. And with any Man City defender, there is going to be rotation inevitably, but in the Champions League, I think Ruben Dias is the most nailed on, and once Gvardiol comes back, he could be the best option to cover the Man City defence, because he has a lot of ball recovery potential, even more than Dias or any other option you can pick from the Man City ranks. But I do like Dias. They've kept 2 clean sheets in the Premier League consecutively, 1-0 wins over Brentford and Bournemouth, and this is the time of year where Man City grind out results, and in the FA Cup they showed the other side to their game, the ruthlessness in front of goal, as they won 6-2 against Luton Town. The final defender has been a bit underwhelming in recent weeks in the Champions League, but I still firmly believe in him, and that's William Saliba. Some of you might be expecting Porto to go through, and I understand that, because Arsenal in the Champions League don't have a great record, particularly in recent years, but I do firmly believe in this Arsenal team in the long term, and I think Saliba is the best Arsenal defender from a UCL fantasy perspective. He's 5.5 million compared to Gabriel at 6, and I think Arsenal have a good chance of keeping a clean sheet at the Emirates, and I actually expected it a few weeks or months ago when Arsenal were really struggling, for Arsenal to lose the first leg against Porto, but then to make a comeback in the second leg, and that's what I still expect from this Arsenal team. And I wouldn't overload on them with 3 or 4 players, because there's still a chance they are eliminated, but I think 1 or 2 players is probably the sweet spot, and Saliba is the best way to cover that Arsenal defence. Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below. I'll mention alternatives for each position at the very end, but let's now move on to the midfielders. Despite missing 2 match days in this Champions League campaign, Jude Bellingham is second amongst all players in terms of UCL fantasy points, only behind Galeno. Bellingham did miss out on matchday 7 due to an ankle injury he sustained versus Girona, where he scored 2 goals in his last appearance. He is now back in training, and a few weeks ago the reports were that Bellingham is targeting matchday 8 as his return date, the second leg against Leipzig, and that could still be the case. He's on course and on track for doing so, and Bellingham for me is the best UCL fantasy asset, period. He offers tremendous value, he's criminally underpriced, and he's in great form overall. But of course, the injury might slow him down a little bit. It could take him some time to ease back, but I think Bellingham is worth buying on the wildcard, limitless, and with normal transfers if he is available for matchday 8. A few other things to note is that Bellingham took Real Madrid's last penalty against Almeria. That was some time ago now, but Bellingham could be on penalties, which only adds to his appeal even further. He's a jack of all trades. I always describe him as this. He's got ball recovery potential. He can win Player of the Match awards, get goals, assists, everything you can really think of in terms of UCL fantasy points. Bellingham can do it, and that's why he's consistently one of the best options every single season. He was good enough at Dortmund, and he's gone up to another level in terms of UCL fantasy output at Real Madrid, and he also has a great record in the Champions League this season. He's returned in all 5 of his Champions League starts. He's got 3 double-digit returns, and there's a lot more to like where that came from. But the second midfielder I'm going for is a bit out of form in terms of pure output, and I'm talking about Zaire Emery, who's got so much potential. I think he could be one of the best midfielders in Europe in a couple of years' time, and he's only got 1 assist in his last 10 games, and he has played as a right-back on several occasions. But in the Champions League, it will be Hakimi playing in that position, and Zaire Emery will slot in the midfield and do a great job there. He's got plenty of double-digit hauls in the Champions League, as I've discussed in previous UCL fantasy videos, but I'm a bit concerned about his positioning in recent Ligue 1 games and also his form in terms of goals and assists. The lack of them is quite concerning, but Zaire Emery at that price, I just don't see anyone else competing, to be quite honest with you. The other midfielders who are quite good and competitive compared to Zaire Emery would be around 6 to 7 million, but in terms of 5.4 million midfielders and below, I don't think anyone comes close to the Frenchman. Now, the third midfielder is one of the most informed players in the Premier League, and that's Phil Foden, who's got 5 goals and 2 assists in his last 7 games across all competitions, including a hat-trick against Brentford in that away victory. I think Phil Foden is a tremendous option. He got a double-digit haul in Matchday 7 against Copenhagen, and I bought De Bruyne in towards the very end, and I was briefly considering selling Foden because I'm not a big fan of tripling up on a certain attack, but how wrong I would have been if I sold Foden, because he's been incredible. You don't sell players in that vein of form. And what I like most about Foden now is how nailed on he is. He was benched against Luton Town in the FA Cup, but before that, he started 15 consecutive games across all competitions in the FA Cup, the Champions League, the Premier League, and the Club World Cup. So there's so much to like with Foden, and now that he's one of the most nailed-on players for Man City, I don't think there are many better amongst the City ranks, with the exception of Erling Haaland. Despite what I said about rotation just now, with Man City having a firm and commanding lead heading into the second leg, there could be rotation, and someone like Foden could be rested for the Premier League because there are some very important games there for Manchester City. They face Manchester United this weekend. They also face Liverpool away in the Premier League. So you could see Foden and some key assets that have been very nailed on recently being benched, and that's why any Man City player is going to be a risk in these scenarios, of course. If the first leg was a bit tighter, it was a draw, for example, or a narrow win, then maybe we wouldn't have these kind of doubts, but that is a possibility that we need to be aware of, and Foden could be rested in Matchday 8. Let's wait and see how that turns out to be. But in the current form Foden is in, and the amount of games he can play in a row, he's very young, of course. He's got quick recovery time. I would still back him to start, and that's why he features in the wildcard team. But don't be surprised if benchings do come and play a part once again in his career. Now we've got 2 midfielder slots left. This one is just a budget option who offers you a lot of ball recovery potential, and he also consistently gets you 5 points or above. And I'm talking about Joshua Kimmich, who did play as a right back in the last game. So that's 2 midfielders here in Zaire Emery and Kimmich, who have played as a right back in recent matches in their domestic leagues. But Kimmich for me is just a great option overall, and despite the ball recoveries, he's got that assist threat. It's not as high as it would have been under Julian Nagelsmann or previous Bayern Munich managers like Hansi Flick, but Kimmich is still a good UCL fantasy option. He's averaging 5.3 points per match day, and I'm a bit concerned about some yellow cards he's picking up, and also the relations between him and Thomas Tuchel. If he was benched in matchday 8, I don't think a lot of us would be surprised, but Kimmich is a very versatile player, and I would back him to start and give you 4 or 5 points at the very least against Lazio in the second leg. Now, the final midfielder, I don't think anyone will have any surprises about this whatsoever. I'm talking about Saka, who's got one of the best home records in all of Europe. And if we actually look at the Champions League specifically, he's got the very best period. He's got 37 points in 3 games at the Emirates. That is more than any other player. And in away games, he's been a bit underwhelming in the Champions League, but Saka can return home and away on a consistent basis. In the Premier League, he scored in 5 consecutive games, which is a personal record for him. He's also got 7 goals in this calendar year, which is more than any other player. And there are so many more records that he's breaking. In terms of his FPL output, he's got 4 double-digit returns in the last 5 games in the Premier League, and he's got Sheffield United away next. And not only that, the other game where he didn't get a double-digit haul, he got 9 points against Liverpool. So he's just showing tremendous consistency. And if he can continue this, I think could really help Arsenal go far in this competition. But Porto will be tough. They had a clear game plan in the first leg and it worked because they stifled Arsenal, but I don't think it will in the second leg. They need to show a bit more ambition offensively, and of course, with that low block, it might take Arsenal some time to break it down, but Saka against low blocks, mid blocks, and also against high lines, he can do it against absolutely any type of opponent, and that's why he's got 3 double-digit returns in 3 home games in the Champions League. So that's the midfield. You've got a balance and variety. You've got 2 budget options in Zaire Emery and Kimmich, and a premium in Saka. Bellingham, who kind of goes without saying. Now, if Bellingham isn't available for Matchday 8, I'll talk about some alternatives in each position, of course, but particularly in the midfield. And there are a lot of injuries you need to be aware of, and I'll talk about all of them, all the injuries and suspensions you need to know about in the Limitless video for Matchday 8. Kane had a little bit of a rough patch, and I say that very loosely because he was still scoring quite a lot of goals, but there were a few blanks in between. Bayern Munich were very underwhelming against Bayer Leverkusen. They were comprehensively beaten, and they're now firmly behind in the Bundesliga title race, and it will take something miraculous, both from Bayer Leverkusen maybe fumbling it and Bayern Munich going on a great run to really change the tide in that title race. But Harry Kane has been consistent over the course of the season. He scored a brace against Leipzig. He was very clutch in that game. He scored a late winner, in fact, and he's got 27 goals in 23 Bundesliga starts, and he's the highest scoring forward in UCL Fantasy with 43 points. Only 1 double-digit haul, but it doesn't matter because Harry Kane can consistently give you 6 to 9 points, and that is what you really want from these assets. He's only priced at around 10 million, so I think he offers great value nonetheless. Now, the second forward is someone who was also in kind of bad form, so to speak, but still scoring goals here and there. But in the last game, he went absolutely ballistic and scored 5 goals in the FA Cup. And I'm talking about Erling Haaland, of course. 4 of those goals were assisted by Kevin De Bruyne, and when they're both on the pitch at the same time, it's one of the best combinations in Europe. We haven't seen it enough during their time at Man City, but if De Bruyne can stay fit and start most games, I just think that benefits Erling Haaland even more. And I know Luton Town are poor defensively, but to score 5 goals in any game is very impressive, to say the least. Erling Haaland was missing a lot of big chances in recent games. He missed 3 against Chelsea, 3 against Bournemouth, and he also missed 2 against Luton Town, but he always gets those chances, and Man City are a machine in terms of creating chances and also burying them on most occasions. In terms of recent Premier League games, they've been in machine mode, grinding out 1-0 results and just doing about enough to secure the victories. But overall, Man City's run since December is incredible. 17 games unbeaten, and Erling Haaland has been injured for a lot of it, but he's now back. If he starts against Copenhagen, he could easily score a brace or a hat-trick, potentially even more goals in a short space of time. He doesn't even need the full 90. 60, 70 minutes is just about enough. That's all Haaland needs to do a great job against Copenhagen, who have been quite impressive in this season's Champions League, but Manchester City should get the job done, and their quality will tell over the 2 legs. Now, the final forward is quite tricky because I think Vinicius Jr. could be the best long-term option, but I can't ignore form. Vinicius has blanked in his last 3 games, whilst the other forward, I think we all know who I'm talking about, has been incredible in the last couple of months. I think Kylian Mbappe just about edges it. In terms of the value, it does say I'm over budget, but this is with the base 105 million. I've got more value tied up, and a lot of you watching will also have enough money to afford this 15-man squad. And as I discuss alternatives later on, you will see ways you can actually afford the foundations of this wildcard team. But Kylian Mbappe has been incredible, and there's so much to like about him. He's only blanked twice in his last 12 games. The Frenchman has 7 goals and 4 assists in his last 7 matches. It's incredible form. And what I also like about him now is that Real Sociedad are really struggling. They only have 1 victory in the last 8 games, so they're really in a bad run of form, and Kylian Mbappe is facing them at the right time. He got that 9-pointer in Matchday 7, and it wouldn't surprise me if he scored against the Spanish outfit yet again. But with Vinicius Jr., he is a close contender. It's between Mbappe and Vinicius for that last forward slot. Vinicius is cheaper, which is a big positive. I also back Real Madrid to go much further than Paris Saint-Germain in this season's Champions League. A lot depends on the draw, of course, but Vinicius is definitely someone who could be held on to long term. Whilst with Mbappe, maybe PSG get to the quarterfinals. After that, though, I think they'd probably be eliminated, but let's wait and see how the draw ends up being. And Vinicius has blanked in the last 3 games, as I mentioned, but he did perform well in that 1-0 win over Sevilla, and he's only blanked once out of 4 Champions League matches this season. Mbappe has been a bit more inconsistent in this competition, at least for this year, of course, because generally Mbappe is incredible in the Champions League. Real Madrid are likely to go far. Like I said, they could even go on to win it for a 15th time. I just don't see PSG doing that, and that's why long-term Vinicius might be the best call, but in terms of form and pure output, I think Mbappe is probably one of the best forwards and players you can buy in UCL Fantasy. But let's now talk about some alternatives in each position. In goal, I would consider Raya, Neuer, Ederson, Kobel, but just bear in mind with Kobel, he's currently injured. I think he picked up that injury in the warm-up of Matchday 7. So those that went for Kobel, very unlucky. That's football and FPL and UCL Fantasy sometimes, and I do feel for you. But Kobel was someone to definitely consider in the future. Having said that, though, with Borussia Dortmund, maybe they'll keep a clean sheet in Matchday 8, but in the quarterfinals, you probably would expect them to be eliminated unless they play PSG or a team that maybe aren't expected to go that far. So once again, a lot depends on the draw. Kobel has been great in this season's Champions League, but I think in terms of other goalkeeper options apart from Lunin and Sommer, the main ones to consider are Raya, Neuer, and Ederson. In terms of defenders, Cancelo is definitely up there. There's no doubt about that. I know Barcelona have been a bit shaky this season defensively, but they're in good form now once Xavi announced that he's leaving at the end of the season. Lewandowski is also rising to the fore up front, but Cancelo, Schlotterbeck, Maatsen, Ryerson, Hakimi, Di Lorenzo, Molina, Koundé, Gabriel are all options I'd consider in the heart of the defence, even Marquinhos, but as I mentioned earlier, he is currently doubtful. In the midfield, I'd also consider De Bruyne, there's no doubt about that, and if he starts, if we get news of him starting before the deadline, I'd definitely buy De Bruyne. The problem is, who do you sacrifice? Maybe you downgrade Mbappe, go to a cheaper forward in order to upgrade one of your midfielders, preferably Zaire Emery or Joshua Kimmich, to Kevin De Bruyne. The other midfielders would include Musiala, Galeno, Odegaard, Rodri, Bernardo Silva, Xavi Simons. As a one matchday punt, I wouldn't be discouraged from buying players from teams you expect to be eliminated, because ultimately you have 5 free transfers in the following round. So for matchday 9, the first leg of the quarterfinals, you get 5 free transfers and you could easily rectify some of the players that are going to blank in the following rounds. And the other midfielders I'd consider are Brahim Diaz, if Bellingham is still not ready to start, and Hakan Çalhanoğlu, who is currently injured. He's got a muscle problem and he could be out for several weeks, so just keep an eye out for that. In terms of forwards, the main alternatives are Vinicius Jr., it goes without saying, Lautaro Martinez, who's been incredible this season, and some people are even touting him as a Ballon d'Or contender, Alvarez from Manchester City, Lewandowski, Rodrigo, Griezmann, who is currently injured. He could be out for a few weeks due to a sprained ankle. And then there's Gabriel Jesus, who is in training. He's close to return, and he's been great in the Champions League. He's got 7.3 points per match day, the most of any forward in this season's competition up until now. So there's a lot of players to consider and a lot of injuries to keep track of. I've covered most of them in this video. Be sure to let me know your thoughts down the comment section below. The captaincy is the last thing that's left, and I'll talk about this in future videos too, so the limitless and the team selection. So for each day, the way I'd go about it is, on the 5th of March, I'd still go for Harry Kane. I know he's been a bit underwhelming in the Champions League, to be fair, but I would go for Harry Kane on the Tuesday. On the Wednesday, Erling Haaland if he starts, there's no doubt about that. Otherwise, you're looking at Foden or Kevin De Bruyne as alternatives. Even Jude Bellingham could be great, but I'd probably favour the Manchester City assets. In the following week, on the 12th of March, on the Tuesday, I would go for Bukayo Saka. I think he's a great option against Porto. I know what happened in the last match day was very disappointing, but Saka in home matches is a different animal in the Champions League, of course. And on the 13th of March, that's where things aren't that great with this wildcard team in terms of the captaincy, but you can go for Mats Hummels. And if you're not too sure about Hummels and about him starting, you can go for Ryerson or Maatsen to cover the Borussia Dortmund defence instead. And I've covered all the alternatives for each position in this video. But let me know your thoughts down the comment section below. And thank you very much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it or found it useful, then be sure to smash the like button and subscribe for new. Let's try to get this video to over 200 likes, and let's keep on pushing towards 23k subscribers and beyond. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram, DylanRCM, and check all the links in the description below for the Patreon, Championships Discord server, the UCL Fantasy League, and Draft Hound. All of that is there. I wish you all the best of luck for Matchday 8 and the rest of the season, and I'll see you next time.